Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Spouse Link live stream. I'm Anna Larson, your Spouse Link ambassador. Now, it's not very often that the Department of Defense gives us a do-over. Welcome to today's topic, Survivor Benefit Plan or SBP Open Season. It's one of those rare, maybe never going to happen again second chances where you can enroll or disenroll from the Survivor Benefit Plan, which provides financial support to military spouses and their children when a military member dies while on active duty or after retirement. Do you want to know a little bit more about this? I hope so, because today's guest, Kate Horrell, is a well-known transition and retirement expert, and she loves talking about the Survivor Benefit Plan, which in and of itself, I'm going to say, is a rare thing. Also, she also understands it really well. So for somebody like me that's going through retirement and has a million things on our plate, Kate is going to be your go-to person that's going to be able to clear up all that murky muddiness that might be fogging your brain right now as you're going through this retirement process. Now, on a personal note, like I did mention, I am so glad there is someone who loves talking about this topic, because when I tried to read the final memorandum on SBP Open Season from the Department of Defense, I had like spots in front of my eyes and chaos started happening in my brain, just trying to understand the ins and outs of it. So I'm going to drop a link just in case you guys need to know more. We're going to give you all the links for all the learning opportunities where you can spend some time learning more about this. But let's get back to today's show and let me introduce my guest and tell you a little bit more about SpouseLink. So today's live stream is through SpouseLink. I am your SpouseLink ambassador. I'm also a copywriter, a digital marketer, homeschool mom, and I am a retired military spouse. Now, these live streams are for military spouses and their family members that are looking to connect and or get some more support as they near or cross over into transition or retirement from active duty military. So SpouseLink was created in 2012 by AFMA, the American Armed Forces Mutual Aid Association, to support, inform, and inspire military spouses around the world. And they do a fantastic job of doing that through their website and information and resources and blogs and these live streams. Now, as we dive into today's topic, please leave comments, share your experiences, drop information. If you have a question, put it in the comment section so that we can bring it up. Kate is here to be kind of our on-site expert. This is a rare, like I mentioned, rare opportunity, right? Let us know where you're joining from. Interact with us. We would love to hear what you have to say about these topics. We value your engagement and interaction with us. So without further information, I am going to bring up Kate's bio and tell you a little bit about our guest today. Kate Horrell is an accredited financial counselor and personal finance educator who helps the military community make the most of their pay and benefits. She also roamed the globe with her now retired sailor for 28 years, carting around 4 kids and 2 cats to wherever the Navy sent them. Sounds like a familiar story to so many of us, I'm sure. Along the way, Kate has learned a few things about paying off debt, balancing a budget, landlording, retirement planning, paying for college, and all sorts of other money things. So without further ado, let me pull this down and bring up Kate. Hi! I'm so excited you're here today.
I love talking about this, so I'm excited to have another place to talk.
I'm telling you, this is like, there's not many people who say, I love talking about finances and SBP and retirement and these kinds of things. So I am so glad you are here with us today. Because when I heard about SBP Open Season, I was like, what? Do we need to reevaluate? Like, I turned to my spouse, I'm like, what are we doing with this? He's like, I don't know. You know, he's like, we did this once already. I don't want to come back to this again. So we're glad you're here.
I think that's a natural reaction. It's a big decision, but because it is such a big decision, this is a really special opportunity to make sure that the decision that you made during, like you said, that busy retirement time really is the decision that you wanted to make.
Yes, absolutely. And so, okay, so this is, like I said in my introduction, this is a rare opportunity. Let's get started right away, because really we're going to talk first. We're going to cover kind of what SBP is, just in case there's somebody out there that isn't even super familiar with that, maybe just starting the retirement process, knows the acronym or heard the words before, but isn't even like, it's not registering in their brain even what this benefit actually is. So let's open up with our first question, which is, what is the survivor benefit plan? And then what is open season? What does that mean?
Sure. I will try to make the first half of this short, but it's not a short answer. The survivor benefit plan is the extension of the military retirement annuity. The most important thing to know about military retirement pay from an estate planning perspective is that it ends with the death of the service member. And the only way that survivors will continue to receive anything tied to that military retirement income is if they are enrolled in the survivor benefit plan. You may have grandparents that perhaps your grandfather had a pension and your grandmother received benefits after they passed away, just based upon the ages of those people. That's the most common way that unfolded. And as with civilian pension plans, you typically have to opt into this survivor benefit plan. The open, typically when you make that decision at the time of retirement, it is relatively irrevocable. You get, it's like a one and done. There are a few little asterisks next to that, but generally you don't get to come back 5 years later and say, oh, we really wish we'd opted in, or gosh, we wish we hadn't gotten into it. But this year is special. In the past, when there have been major changes to the laws that surround the survivor benefit plan, if they were big enough changes, Congress would authorize an open season to let people go back and revisit their decisions because of the new information that exists because of the new law. This particular year's open season is the result of the elimination of an old rule that used to sometimes reduce the survivor benefit plan benefits if the survivors were also getting benefits from the VA. That's been completely eliminated, and so Congress saw fit to make this open season. The one thing I will say about this is it's easy for some people to say, well, if we've had an open season before, won't there just be another one again in the future? I would argue probably not. The last one was almost 20 years ago, first of all. And second of all, they've about got this SBP law right. Like, there aren't still these glaring issues floating around out there that everyone agrees, oh, we need to fix that about SBP. I don't really think there's anything left to be fixed to have a major change in the law that would cause another open season in the future.
Yeah, so I didn't even know there had been previous open seasons. I'm going to just say, 20 years ago was way back when I was a brand new military spouse, and SBP wasn't even like something I even knew about necessarily.
Yeah.
I do want to make sure that we point out SBP is that one benefit where if you choose not to take it, the military spouse has to actually sign off on agreeing to that. This is one of those mutual decision benefits that you have to have these conversations about when it comes down to time to retire. It can't be just something your soldier says, this is what we're doing, and off they go, right? It is one of those, like, both parties have to be involved.
In theory, yes. I will say that what sometimes happens, and it's easy to see how it happens in the busyness of retirement, is the service member comes home and says, I need your signature on this form. It is supposed to be notarized. Does that always happen? I couldn't say for sure. But, I don't know about you. There are definitely times I give my husband a piece of paper and I'm like, I just need your signature. And he doesn't ask a lot of questions. And so that could happen in this situation, particularly if the service member doesn't really understand what a big decision they're signing off on. And then what you have is 5 or 10 years down the road, people are a little bit further in their estate planning thought process, and they discover, oh, maybe we should have taken that decision a little bit more seriously.
Yeah. So this is your chance. All those people that went through that thought process and said to themselves, ooh, maybe this is something that we should have looked at in more detail. This is the chance, right? Open season is where now you get a chance to either enroll in it, or if you're enrolled in it and you're like, I wish we had not made that choice, to disenroll from SBP, which I mean, I just remember having that conversation where they were like, this is it. You make this decision and it is final, right? So I never thought this would be what happened. So let's talk really quick about who is eligible to participate in open enrollment or open season. I'm going to call it open season.
So, eligible retirees and National Guard and Reserve component members and gray area retirees who were not enrolled in SBP on December 22nd of last year, or alternately were eligible to be enrolled, but had opted, either they weren't enrolled or they were enrolled, but either way, they had to be eligible to be enrolled on that date. Does that make sense? It's a little confusing because it seems like that's everybody. Either you're enrolled and you're not. But there are some, if you weren't already retired, you weren't eligible.
Oh, got it. So if you retired in January of 2023,
yep,
this does not apply to you any longer. You had to be fully retired as of that December date.
In the case of reservists, you had to be retirement eligible, if that makes sense, because reservists have a little different path of how things work.
Okay.
They have to be special.
Yeah. So is there somebody who's going to say, yes, you're eligible? Or is this one of those things where you contact them and you fill it out? And then if for some reason you don't qualify, then they're like, sorry, you don't get this option.
In theory, everybody should know. Yeah. But with the reserve component is sometimes a little confusing because they do get this thing called a 20-year letter in the reserves that starts the clock on their SBP eligibility, but sometimes they don't take action on it at that point in time. So those would be the people that I would be concerned may not realize this applies to them.
Okay, so reservists, if I have any reserve families out there and you have questions, guess who your go-to person is going to be? I'm just going to put little finger pointers here at Kate. Because if you have questions or if you aren't sure if you're eligible, make sure you reach out and find out if you meet that date requirement of December of 2022 in order to participate in open season. So Correct. Let's talk about the pros and cons, right? Of either adding SBP now or removing it. But let's start with adding the pros and cons of adding SBP to your retirement plan if you are now already retired.
So I think I'll start off with a little pros and cons of just SBP in general.
Okay.
Because that is confusing for people. At the survivor benefit plan is a very unique tool in your estate planning toolkit because it provides a monthly stream of income that is potentially for lifetime. It can be lifetime for the spouses as long as they don't remarry before age 55. And it is up to 18 or 22 for children. And then if you have a disabled child, it could potentially be for their lifetime as well. So this is a really unique feature of survivor benefit plan is that it is potentially lifetime income that comes in every month. And importantly, it is inflation adjusted. And as we all remember from last year, when inflation starts moving up, we've lived in a period of time that most of us don't really remember very high inflation in our adult life until these last year or two.
Yeah.
And it's been eye-opening for us all to see how much inflation really can impact your spending power. And so having a lifetime stream of income that will continue to have consistent spending power over the whole course of your life can be extremely valuable, particularly when you think that historically over the course of time, prices in America have doubled about every 20 years. So, if a surviving spouse were to survive for 20 years and their income were not inflation adjusted, their purchasing power would be half of what it was at the beginning of those 20 years. But because SBP is inflation adjusted, their purchasing power would remain the same. And sometimes you have survivors that continue to get the survivor benefit plan benefits for 30, 40, 50 years if they have a particularly long life and their retiree died a little earlier than average. So If you are trying to
Yeah.
build a
Okay.
retirement plan and you don't already have a tool in there that's going to provide sort of lifetime income and inflation adjustment, SBP can be the tool that fills those two needs. Did that answer the question?
Okay. Yeah, no, I think it does. I think knowing the benefit of having SBP, what it does for a military family, right, is a huge piece of the puzzle in terms of whether or not you should look at this as part of your retirement plan. Income, your retirement income plan is basically what this would be, right? So
Yep.
I know that there's some things specifically that when I went to like the DFAST site and was like looking at whether or not, what is SBP and should you consider it and whatnot. And there was a couple of things that there was like 3 questions that they asked. I want to pull those questions up. I know I have it here. But the 3 questions were, is it a product you can use? Right. And I think that you can
Yep.
answer that by like saying to yourself, is this something that my family needs? Retirement
Mhm.
income if I were to pass away, speaking from the viewpoint of the service member, right?
Right.
The second one is, how much SBP would I need?
Yep.
Right. And then this one, really the answer becomes this big gray unknown factor because you don't know inflation. You don't know what day you may or may not pass away. You don't know how long your spouse and will be surviving after you, correct? Right. So this is the big gray unknown. And then the third question that they said you should be asking yourself is, how much SBP can I afford? Right. And then that would be the third one. And they talked a little bit about reminding us about the tax advantage to the premiums. So could you speak on that for just a minute,
Sure.
Kate?
Can I go back to those 3 things? Because I think they're great questions and they're worthy of a little elaboration. So the
Absolutely.
first question is this a product you can use? And I don't know if y'all are like me, but I've been known when I see something on sale to get really sucked in by the like clearance price and buy something I don't actually need. And then I get home and I'm like, well, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Not every family needs SBP. Sometimes a surviving spouse has their own pension. Sometimes a family has enough investable assets right at that moment, not things that they plan to accumulate in the future, but right at the point in decision time, that if the surviving spouse needed to use those assets to live on, they could. There are a wide variety of different reasons why a family may not need SBP. However, the reality is, we all know, is that military spouses often have put their career second, and they may not be able to reach the sort of career potential that they would have under different circumstances. So they may not have a pension. They may not have a 401k with a huge balance in it that they could start taking distributions for. But you want to buy the right tool for the job you have. I liken it to a lot of times people will compare SBP to life insurance, or they might compare it to investments. And I think of them as like a knife, a fork, and a spoon. And you can cut a steak with a fork, but it's not a really good process. And you can eat peas with a knife. This is also not an ideal thing. And sometimes when you try to stab a pea with a fork, sometimes you get it right through the middle, and sometimes it goes bing and it goes off the table altogether. So with that analogy, you need to sit down and figure out what your family's needs are. If a spouse is surviving, would their biggest need be paying off a mortgage? Well, if you want to lump sum pay off a mortgage, maybe SBP is not the right tool for that job. But if they need monthly income, a stream of income, then there's a good chance that SBP is the right way to get to it.
Okay, so can I pause you for just a second? I want to throw this comment up that came from Michael Meese. He says, so if we didn't sign up when we retired, why would we be changing our minds now? I think this plays directly into what you're talking about right now.
Yep. So there's a couple of reasons, Michael. In my experience and in my working with clients, a lot of people made SBP decisions either without enough information to make a good decision, or they made it with incorrect information. There is a lot of bad gouge out there about SBP. And if I walk into a room of 10 retiring service members today and I ask them about SBP, probably 7 or 8 of them are going to tell me it's a ripoff. And I can tell you mathematically why that's not true. But once service members get that idea in their head, it can be really hard to dissuade them. It may not be the right tool. Like you said, is this a tool that you need? But it's not a ripoff by any stretch of the imagination. The other thing is your circumstances may have changed. I know of a service member who, when they retired, they had a small child. And they did not opt for SBP for whatever reason. And that child has been diagnosed with a developmental delay that is going to render them incapable of self-support for their life. And this is an opportunity for them to opt back into SBP, to potentially for that child to have these benefits as they get older once the service member is gone. I have a very good friend who's a super crazy smart financial planner who he wasn't a financial planner when he retired from the military. He didn't have the level of analysis skills that he has now. And the analysis that they made at the time was that it wasn't a good use of their money. And now, several years later, he's looking at it in a very different light. So sometimes your circumstances may have changed. Sometimes you may not have had all the information, or you may have been working with misinformation.
So it may be one of those things you want to spend an hour on and reevaluate. Where are we at now? What does our retirement plan look like? Is it working for our family? Right now, I know that there's some like back pay things you have to do if you choose to enroll now if you were not previously enrolled. Can you talk about that a little bit and kind of what that would look like for a military family? Because if you've been 20 years out and you suddenly jump on SBP, there's a hefty price tag that's going to be attached to that decision versus 1 or 2 years out, and what a military family would be looking at that point.
Absolutely. And that is part of the decision-making process. You do go back and repay every bit of premium that you would have paid had the decision been made at the time of retirement. And a lot of people will go, well, why would we have to do that? Because I didn't have coverage for all those years, which is a fair and true statement. But the reason that you have to go back and make all of those payments is because there is what's called a paid up status in SBP. That if you have made 30 years of SBP premium payments and you are age 70, you're done. The coverage remains in force, but you don't have to make any more payments. Now, if you're like my spouse who didn't retire until he was 52, he won't be paid up till he's 82 because you have to make those full 30 years. So if you're, but for someone perhaps who retired at 38, they would have to make it all the way to 70 because it's both 30 years of payments and age 70. But when you go in and buy back all those years that you didn't pay for, those apply towards your 30 years.
Got it. Okay. So that's, yeah.
But you're talking about a lot of money. Some people, depending on the pay grade and the retirement amount of the service member, through military retirement pay, SBP it's not cheap because it's a valuable product. And if it's a few $100s a month, might be a few $1,000s a year. As you said, if you multiply a few $1,000s a year by 10 years or 20 years, we're talking about a large chunk of money to buy back in.
Yeah. But if your circumstances are such that you can now see a good value to SBP, depending on, what's going on with you and your family, then it might be worth it to look at that if you have the financial ability to do that. And it does make sense. Either way, the fact that it's even an option right now is a big deal, right?
And I will say, those big chunks of money that sound overwhelming, and you think, well, how could that ever make sense, right? Let's say the SBP premium was $300 a month times 12 months, $3,600 a year. And then there's inflation built into the calculation. So it's not just a straight line calculation. So maybe, let's say it was going to be $30,000 to buy in. And you think, oh my gosh, how could that ever make sense? But the math shows that even if a retiree makes an entire 30 years of payments, if they were to pass away in the 31st year, their survivor would have to live less than 4 years to get every single cent that they contributed, because they are fairly large payments relative to what you're getting. You know, the survivor's benefit is pretty big. It's not enough to live on, but it can be a large chunk of, you know, when you add it to your pie, that your piece of your pie has maybe Social Security, maybe has some investments, maybe has some life insurance. That SBP can be a pretty sizable piece of the whole pie.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and that is a really good point to make. I think that 4-year payback time frame that you just mentioned is really a huge point of understanding that people need to have when it comes to whether or not SBP is a good idea for their family, whether it's open season SBP or whether you're just looking at it now for your retirement over the next couple of years. So
And
Teresa, go ahead.
That's okay. It's important to keep in mind, right, that 4 years is not including inflation. So it actually mathematically ends up being significantly less. And that 4 years, again, assumes that the military retiree lived 30 years. And actuarially, the data shows that that's not always the case. We all know anecdotes of people who didn't make it a year after military retirement.
Yeah.
And at this particular stage in time, most military retirees are male, and most military retirees are married to females. And in a little bit, because of just the natural demographics of male and female age patterns, and also because military service is hard on a body, female military spouses very strongly tend to outlive their male husband veterans.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see some statistics and data on that. I did not come prepared for that today, people. I'm just throwing out. Kate's like, wait, I might. But that is something.
I have a slide for that.
Yeah, right. I know that's one of those things. I'll definitely do a follow up. Maybe Kate and I can have a follow up like post or something like that talks about those statistics and what they do look like for a military family, and kind of in helping in that process of, yes, we do want SBP, or no, we don't. So we had one more question come in while you were talking about the addition of SBP from Teresa, who says, are we able to add children at this point if the spouse is already enrolled? And do we have to pay that back as well?
That's a great question. And the answer is no. There is no provision in this open season to change your existing enrollment or to increase or decrease the amount of your existing enrollment. So the beneficiary groups can't be changed, and the amount of coverage can't be changed in this open enrollment. And they even wrote the rules very specifically because at some point early in this process, somebody said, well, I'll just disenroll and I'll re-enroll again. And they wrote the rules to make sure that you couldn't do that. I don't know the rationale behind it, but that is the way the law is written.
So it is open season with some of those asterisks applied to the end of that word.
Absolutely. It's a get out or get in situation. It is not a rearrange your plans kind of situation.
Okay. All right. So then let's talk a little bit about why in the world would we want to then remove SBP from our retirement plan if we've been paying into it for a while? Because my understanding is you're not getting any of your money back at this point. They're not paying you back. They're not going to pay you back what you paid into it. So what would be a situation where a military family would say, let's take SBP off our current retirement income plan and, you know, replace it, and or we don't need something to replace it?
That's a great question too. And I'm going to start out by telling you the wrong answer to this question, because it's an answer that I hear a lot. A lot of people will say, that's a big chunk of our budget that we really can't afford. It's decreasing our standard of living to be paying for SBP every month. To those people, I would like to propose that if living off 93.5% of your military retirement pay is a financial struggle for you, how would your survivors live on 0% of your military retirement pay?
That's a great question.
Because that's the reality of the situation. It is a little bit of a catch-22, because the reasons you might want to opt out of SBP are because you've got great, solid other financial plans and you don't need an additional lifetime stream of income. Maybe the service member retired and the spouse finally had the ability to jump back into their career and they are killing it. They have a pension. They have a big 401k. They're capable of self-support. Your kids have all graduated from college and launched, and they're not a concern anymore. Maybe you inherited a whole bunch of money. Maybe you won the lottery.
Right.
The catch-22 of this is the people for whom it makes the most sense to maybe back out of SBP are the people for whom the amount of that premium is not impacting their life at all, right? Because they're doing fine, whether they pay that premium or not. So there are definitely reasons that or again, maybe you just had bad information. Maybe you were a dual military couple. You both served 25 years. You both have your own military retirement pay. But somebody at the last minute said, you got to get SBP, and you just did it because it was retirement and you were crazy and you had to make it happen.
Yeah.
Maybe you couldn't come to an agreement as a couple at the point in time. And because it's really the spouse's decision, and no decision got made. And so by default, you were fully enrolled in something that you didn't want or need.
Because that is the default. By the way, just
default.
To make sure everyone understands, the default is they're going to enroll you if you don't come back with a no.
And they are going to enroll you in full coverage. One of the things a lot of people don't know about SBP is it's frequently talked about it as its relationship to gross military retirement pay, the whole shebang of military retirement pay. But you don't have to enroll at the full military retirement pay level. You can cover as little as $300 of military retirement pay. And this is an option that my husband and I looked at as we built our financial plan. Was maybe I didn't need to cover all of full military retirement pay. Maybe an estate plan for me, if I were a survivor, didn't need to be the full amount. As it turns out, because we have a special needs child, we did end up taking full coverage, but we looked at those options along the way.
Yeah. Okay. So we have a question that came in from Kathleen about the reserves. SBP was never mentioned with the reserves. Is it still the default?
The reserves yes, is the short answer to that question. The long answer to that question, and I would have to refer to my notes because I wouldn't want to tell you something wrong, was the abbreviated outline is that the reserves actually have two different inflection points for SBP. Unlike active duty members where it's a one and done at retirement, the reserves, as part of receiving their 20-year letter, or notice of eligibility, it's sometimes called, that they are eligible to retire. There is a SBP election that can be made at that time, but there is a default election built into that one. And then depending on what they elected at the time that they received their 20-year letter, there's also another election that happens when they apply to receive military retirement pay.
Okay, so a two-part process for the reserves. And again, Kathleen, let me just point my fingers this way. If you have other questions, we're going to drop Kate's contact information, and she would be somebody that you would be able to reach out to who is super familiar with military finances, SBP. I mean, this is her day job. This is what she does, is support military families through this kind of decision process.
Recently become a lot smarter on reserve SBP. I will admit that like 2 years ago, people would say reserve SBP, and I would go. But now, as long as I pull up my little document, I feel very like I can answer your questions. I just wouldn't want to answer them off the top of my head because there are some little nuances that I wouldn't want to misspeak.
Got it. Okay. All right. Fantastic. All right. So I think we've covered kind of the why would we add it? Why would we remove it? Some of the pros and cons that are associated with that. I mean, it really comes down to, it feels like looking at your current circumstances and then having to make some guesswork into what your future looks like, just like you did when we originally elected or did not elect to take SBP upon retirement. And so, I guess the same holds true now, but the fact that it's an option to even make that different choice is kind of a big deal and should not be ignored by currently retired military families. Yep. Unless you're like, we're sticking with what we got. We absolutely know this is the right choice for us.
I think every family should at least have a 4 or 5 sentence conversation. Hey, there's this SBP open season. Were we informed when we made this decision? Do we feel like, does our gut say it was the right decision? And does the math say it was the right decision? And if that's all confusing to you, there are people out here who this is their job and they can help guide you. And depending on their skill set, they may even be able to make a recommendation. However, let me just put this great big asterisk out there.
Yeah.
There are many people in the community who have a financial interest in helping you make your SBP decision. Often that is because they want to sell you a different product that they say is going to replace SBP, and that selling you this product is going to make them money. And I've actually talked to some of these people who really, they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. But they often are also working from a place of misinformation. So just be aware that if you do look for outside help with this decision, use someone who is not going to benefit financially from the decisions that you make. You might want to pay somebody a flat rate, a few $100s to do an analysis for you, but someone who doesn't have a product to sell you.
Yeah.
This is often, for many families, this is the biggest financial decision you will ever make in your life. It's kind of up here with buying a house or where your kids go to college. Yeah. So there's no shame in bringing in help for this one.
Absolutely. And that was the perfect lead in to sharing your screen. I'm going to share my screen because I originally had all these links I was going to drop that were for hey, where you can go to find information about this or where you can go to find information about that. And then Kate said, I have this blog post where I put 10-ish places to learn about the survivor benefit plan. I'm like, let me drop that link. But I want to run through it really quick to make sure that people see kind of what you have on here, and you can kind of direct them to very specific links, which might help them with this process. So as I scroll down through here, you can see that Kate talks a little bit about what the survivor benefit plan is. And then this series, she has this larger series that's the complete list of posts of everything she's talking about specifically. Are there any here that you would be go read this one for sure if you're considering, or anything like that, Kate? I'm
actually going to throw out another person. If you scroll up just a smidge, I've got these broken down into 3 chunks of the other direction scroll, whatever you call it.
This way?
That way. I've got learning about it, and then there's also, what's the next section called? I forget what word I used.
It's education.
Analyzing it, and then applying that information to your specific situation, making an individual decision. But up in the education section, I'm going to give a great big shout out to Navy Mutual Aid Association, who is not a Navy exclusive organization. I think it's the 3rd link, and then that's the image there in the middle. Twice a month, they do a monthly webinar on SBP that is, I think, the best SBP tool out there. And it's virtual. It's on the 3rd Friday of every month, one during the day, one during the evening, and you just log on from wherever you are. The presenters are really good. And the other thing is sometimes they have different people presenting from time to time. So maybe you listen to it 1 month and you think you know what you're doing, and it's the same slide deck. But when you get a different person presenting a slide deck, they may say something different, or you may just hear something different. And this is a big enough decision. Maybe go listen to the webinar 2 months in a row if there's going to be a different presenter. Also, these classes get held on your bases. Go to them. Listen to somebody else's opinion. I will say that sadly, we do get some people who teach some of the classes on base sometimes have preconceived notions about what is right for a family, and just push those out of your head. Take the information and don't take their opinions along with them. Also, we talked about before we got started, this actuary.defense.gov page is a wealth of calculators. It's right. Oh, you just scratched down from it. It's right. Stop. It's like the second from the bottom bullet point.
This one right here. I'm going to highlight it. This one.
Yep. This is a fantastic resource from the Department of Defense, the Office of the Actuary, that has calculators that let you calculate what your premium would be, what your benefit would be. But more importantly, it will produce some pretty complicated and slightly confusing graphs of or charts of, if you enroll here and the service member dies at this year, this how much benefits the surviving families will get over time. It's just for a dork like me, it's amazing stuff, but it's also a little overwhelming.
So if you want some slightly confusing graphs as part of your decision-making process, now you know where to get them from. But I will say we did drop in on this website, and they have, I'm peeking at it. I don't want to stop screen share, but they have SBP Premium, SBP Probability, SBP Subsidy, and SBP Insurance. Those 4 different calculators are available on that link right there. And through those 4, you should be able to get the data, like the financial data and backing that you need to make a really smart decision for your family. So, okay. So anything else on your website, Kate, that we want to direct them to? I do want to just scroll down a little bit more. Other than education, she has analysis and consideration. There's a book in there. There's another couple of links in there for articles. And then she talks about your individual decision and kind of what you should be looking at, some things to think about as you're going through that process. Is there anything else you would add to this? I will drop this link in.
Yeah. I actually have a couple articles I'll try to throw in there, because during this SBP Open season, a few people have done some really good analysis of when they approached their open, they revisited their SBP decision as part of this open season, and they've written about what they thought and how they approached that, which is like with many large decisions in life, figuring out how to start the decision-making process is sometimes the hardest part of the decision. I always try to use the line from Mary Poppins where she says, well begun is half done. But sometimes that well begun is really crazy hard.
It's so true. It is really crazy hard. So Kate, this has been amazing. I think you've been able to really answer a lot of questions that people have about this SBP process. And if they'd heard of open season but hadn't thought, well, this is no big deal, I already made my decision at this point, I think you gave them some good food for thought in terms of thinking maybe we should have that 5-second conversation. And I'm actually gonna go back and I'm gonna pull that sound clip of those 3 questions you said. Have a conversation, ask yourselves these questions, and make sure that you feel really good about that decision you did make at whatever point your retirement came, or whether it was a yes or a no at that point in time for SBP. Can you give us, what would be your final piece, before I let you go, what is your final piece of advice, your final word of advice for transitioning, retiring military families?
Wow.
Only one.
Only one.
Just one. Yeah.
Take this SBP, it's going to come back to SBP. Be very intentional about this decision and really take a lot more time than you maybe think you need to ensure that you have accurate information and that you're making your decision. Whatever decision is right for you is based on facts, and it isn't based on myths or rumors or emotions. But when it all comes right down to it and you can math it out left, right, and center, there's a very large emotional component to this decision. Can the service member sleep at night feeling that they have made the right choice for their survivors? And at the same time, does the military spouse feel that the decision that they made supports them? And in my mind, right, this is like now you're out of the military, you got to deal with each other all the time, and you want to get along, and you want both parties to feel that their needs are being met by this decision.
Yeah. She's not kidding. That whole like you're together all the time thing, it's true. Don't think it's not going to happen. Don't be like, oh, they're going to be working. It's going to be different. It'll be the same. No, it's not. It's different across the board. So I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kate. I want to make sure that people know how to find you if they are interested in connecting with you further. Can you let them know kind of the different locations you're at and what to do with them?
Sure. The places that I am most active, obviously on my blog, but my blog I really post like once a week. There is a trove of older articles there that you can find information on, but I'm on Facebook all the time. I do a lot of research on Facebook, and I also answer a ton of questions on Facebook. And I'm trying this year to be more deliberate about spending more time on LinkedIn, because there's some really smart conversations happening there.
There are some smart conversations happening there. So make sure you go and follow Kate at all of these different places. If you want to reach out to her, you can go to her website. Contact information is all there on a professional capacity, as well as just, connecting with her online. I highly recommend it. There are a few people that are so well informed about military finances as I found with Kate. And if you don't know her name, you are not in the retirement circles yet, because her blogs get passed around. Like they're like, oh, you need to know this? Here's Kate Horrell's blog. Oh, here's Kate Horrell's blog. Those links are dropped all over retirement and transition military pages on all the different platforms. So you will get to know Kate's name as you start going through this process. All right. With that, I'm going to pull this down. I want to just tell you thank you again so much for being there for our viewers today, for answering their questions, for giving us so much good information about SBP and open season, because I think we kind of covered both topics pretty extensively. And I hope everyone that is out there watching right now feels much more informed and prepared and ready to make those decisions that come with having this opportunity to either enroll or disenroll. And with that, we want to thank you for being here. Kate, thank you again for being my awesome guest today. And I hope to see you on our next Spouse Link live stream. Hi, everybody. Have a great day.